Hey guys, welcome to the Week of Awesome. Doing it for two reasons. A, it's the week before Christmas, so I'm actually going to think about making this a regular thing where we do the Week of Awesome leading up to Christmas. However, this year it's because I have to catch up on episode count since we have not posted anything in about a month. I apologize for that. Anyone out there that knows what's going on, you know why I've been late with it. On Tuesday's episode, December 20th, I'll probably get in a lot of detail because I'm still have to sit down and record that. It's going to be a solo podcast. I'm going to sit down and record and talk about why we have been delayed in posting some stuff and just talk about things in general. But let's not worry about that now. Today, December 18th, we'll say, Sunday, December 18th, we are starting the Week of Awesome right here on awesomepodcast.com, and we're continuing our conversation with Caed Aldwych from the GSO, and we're going to go beyond the moon in his space talk right here on awesomepodcast.com.
Did you have an awesome time? Did you drink awesome shooters and listen to awesome music and then just sit around and soak up each other's awesomeness?
Awesome.
That was awesome.
You guys are awesome.
No, you're awesome.
You are awesome.
Sir, you are awesome. Seriously.
Awesome.
Everything is awesome.
Welcome to this week's edition of Everything is Awesome. I'm your host, Kev, and this is the show where we sit down and talk to awesome people about awesome things. Now, this is not a typical, part 2 show that I'm doing. Normally, we sit down in one session, record both parts. I cut these things all together, but because of the great time difference, we're actually recording this. This is the first time in Everything is Awesome history that we're recording a 2-part episode in actual 2 parts. It's kind of cool. A little one of those little ticks off the to-do board, I guess, for Everything is Awesome. Last week we talked to this man about space, and we're going to go right back into it. We're going to move away from the moon and go to some other places. Please welcome back to the show. Oh my God, awful. Caed Aldwych.
Perfect.
Yes. All right. It's been a couple days for us since the last time we spoke. Thanks for coming back on the show. How are you doing, sir?
Excellent. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. So when we last left off, we kind of finished up talking about Lunar Station 1.
Correct.
That's going to be on the moon and all the fascinating details about that. Same thing with Earth Station 1 from the GSO. Then we kind of teased Mars a little bit. So let's kind of just jump right into it and talk Mars. We teased the idea that you putting a station on there. I'm guessing Mars Station 1, if I had to guess.
It sounds like a good name.
Now, what would you do? Because I would imagine, following suit with what you're doing with the moon, Earth Station 1 is set up to simulate the moon. What are you going to do for Mars? How are you going to prepare the Mars station?
Yeah, the Mars station will probably be developed a whole lot different than the lunar station, at least in terms of how we're situating ourselves for a lunar station. Basically, as a commercial operation, none of us have ever, since the Apollo program, been back to the moon. So actually living there and working there requires a lot of thought, a lot of training, a lot of different systems, and those systems need to be trained upon so that once we do hit the ground on the lunar surface, we can do so much more effectively and safer. With Mars, since we'll already have our establishment on the moon, we will also have resupply, because the moon can operate as a perfect platform for resupply operations to Mars. So, in effect, assets that we'll need to go to Mars we'll be able to develop right from the lunar surface. So we'll be developing those assets within an environment which is almost similar in scope to how we would proceed on Mars. Mars having a limited atmosphere is a little bit different from the moon, but for the purposes of creating a station and operating in the station, we still need to be in a closed environment pretty much anywhere in our solar system. From the moon, we've already had that experience, and it'll make our job going to Mars a hell of a lot easier. Plus, we'll be able to develop the assets that'll protect the crew on a 7 to 9 month journey to Mars in ships that are constructed from the moon that can protect against radiation.
So, and what would the I guess the mission for Mars be? Would it be similar to the moon, just kind of more exploration? Would it be explore like what I guess explore like the potential of sustainable life?
The other interesting thing about Mars, because it's so far away, determining a specific goal or many specific goals, which is what's going to be needed. There's going to be the term colonization. I don't like that term, and the business community does, and usually gets turned off by the term colonization, and that's what a lot of the Mars First folks think. In terms of going to Mars, it's a colonization effort. To colonize a distant region, you need to have a reason to colonize, and the only reason they can come up with typically is because we want to go and because we can live there. But that doesn't help an investor out return upon their investment. So without a specific goal to be able to generate revenues for colonization is pretty much out. So you were correct when you were mentioning exploration. And exploration can be terms that delve into many different aspects. One, since Mars is further out than Earth, and because it is situated in its location, we could put astronomy platforms on it to search out further in space. It's also interesting in the fact that it has a very oblong orbiting period around the sun, which will give us even further views into deep space. Not to mention the fact that science has proven that there is at least microbial life on Mars, so the sciences aspects of Mars is a very deterministic point from which we can obtain revenues to actually go to Mars and do some work.
And we were discussing, at least in the early parts of going to the moon, like the time constraints that you have to spend there. Would that all be kind of worked out by the time you got to Mars, or is there something similar to where you're spending 7 to 9 months to get there? You can only spend X amount of time and have to return.
Yeah, well, with the Mars mission, because it's so far away, like I said, it has a very oblong orbit. It takes 7 to 9 months to get to it at its closest approach point to Earth. Once you're there, you're stuck there for about 2 years before you reach that close approach again. So wow. Basically, going to Mars is long term, and anybody that does go there is fairly limited in being able to return easily. Either way, they're going to be there for at least 2 to 3 years before they can return. So long-term operations are going to be the order of the day on Mars.
And how long would it take to resupply from the moon?
Resupply can be a continuous effort from the moon. I mentioned in the last program we're going to develop a mag rail. And with mag rails, you can generate speed. And since the lunar surface has no atmospheric pressure, there's no air resistance to stop anything. So you can really speed up materials and ships and components into space rather quickly and whatever speed you want without the waste of fuel from rocket lift. With that being said, there is some resistance in the form of gravity, but it's 1/6 that of Earth, so you do have to achieve speeds that can escape the gravity well of the moon, which is going to be fairly easy with a mag rail and the power supplies that we put in system to operate it. With a mag rail, we can launch containers on a trajectory towards Mars and at a speed that Mars will catch those objects in its orbit and within its gravity. And then from orbit around Mars, assets can pick that material up and take it to the surface.
Oh, so you would essentially kind of just throw the container full of supplies into space and let its natural momentum take it to Mars versus like a rocketed ship.
Correct. So basically, we could send supply containers. They'd be very sophisticated supply containers that would carry some fuel and some rockets for maneuvering once it gets to Mars. But other than that, they'd just be carrying supplies, and we could sit there and send them continuously. So we could begin fairly early sending supplies prior to any journey out there. So they could have tons of supplies literally in orbit waiting for them when they arrive.
But the time frame would be about what, like 7 to 9 months, same as coming from, I guess Earth.
Correct.
Okay. Now, would I guess tourism be a option for Mars, or I guess not if long term is 2 years?
Yeah, tourism won't be an industry that operates very well on Mars, at least not in the. It would be in the terms of somebody that happens to have that amount of time to be able to spend on tourism. So you're talking the very rich might want to take a trip to Mars and stay there for 2 to 3 years before a return. There's not many people that will probably do that. So tourism probably isn't going to be the thing. And even though I hate to use the term colonization, at some point, from exploration missions, stations will form. Mars will have to become also a platform like the Moon for further out. So it'll also be another waypoint along our journey. Mars itself, being as it does have a limited atmosphere, and being that it does have 1/8 Earth's gravity, which is fairly close, colonization on Mars would be a lot easier than on the Moon. So seeing a point in time, 10 to 15 years from now, of people being on Mars and living on Mars, I suspect those people would probably stay there for quite a long time and live there and form their new society, if you will. And a society that far removed will begin to create its own culture. This is like the one big dream of Elon Musk of SpaceX, is to retire on Mars, and that's why his big push is towards Mars.
And it sounds like, once it gets to that point, you're developing its own culture. You mentioned, I almost imagine at first it sounds like I would guess it would be like the Moon, where it would operate under international law. But I would imagine at some point it just kind of would, by just nature of the human way, it would develop its own governmental policies.
Yeah, at some point it would, yes.
Now, beyond Mars, because this is something that you dropped at the end of the last episode, and I don't know if there's what else we can talk about with Mars. I know I think we pretty much covered. Obviously, it's a great investment for businesses that want to open up, I guess, similar industries that they're going to have on the Moon, because you're going to have people out there long term. So they're going to need food. They're going to need a place to sleep. They're going to need all that stuff. But what's beyond Mars for the GSO?
For the GSO beyond Mars, I fully intend, and the GSO fully intends, to drive humanity out into deep space. And that's why we always say the Moon is our first goal. From there are assets that the Moon needs, because the Moon doesn't have it. The Moon does not have significant amounts of water, and the water it does have is very hard to get at, very hard to reach and process. At some point we will, but that limited resource on the Moon is not finite. It will only last a certain amount of time and be gone. So we need to find a very abundant source in the solar system, which is water. And you have the asteroid belt, which is further out from Mars. So from Mars, we'll need a platform in the asteroid belt that can harvest large chunks of water ice and bring them back to areas that are going to need it. Water is significant in the fact that it can be turned into fuel. It can also be used to create oxygen. Of course, we need it to drink and clean and do everything we need for it. And on top of all that, water can also be used as a radiation shielding. It's the best form of radiation shielding we know of currently. So in that regard, the mining industry of the asteroid belt will primarily be focused on water. A lot of people will talk about from planetary resources and deep space industries that want to mine the asteroid belt. They rarely talk about water. They talk about bringing metals and other materials from asteroid belt to Earth to sell. And that's next to impossible because the materials you get from the asteroid belt, you can easily dig out of the ground here on Earth at a lot cheaper price, so they won't find any buyers. So it's kind of impressive that they're engaging on this long-term mining project of the asteroid belt, and they don't consider water as being the resource that's going to be needed in space. From the asteroid belt and platforms there, in order to turn humanity into a spacefaring race, we need to go further out and lay platforms as we go. And the next stop for the GSO would be Jupiter and the moon called Callisto. And the reason why Callisto is so important is a floating rock kind of like the moon. It has a very limited atmosphere, but it's full of metals, things we can use to continue building. And it's at a location in Jupiter that is just outside of Jupiter's radiation belt. It's the only moon that is pretty much outside of Jupiter's radiation belt that's part of the Galilean moons. There's 4 of them. A lot of scientists are interested in Io and Europa and some of the other moons that are around Jupiter, but they're within the radiation belt, which is a very powerful one. But from Callisto, we can develop the systems and assets we need to reach those other moons. And Europa is significant in the fact that it's basically a planet of water. So it's a big floating rock. It more than likely has a warm ocean underneath its ice crust, simply because of the gravitational pull of Jupiter is constantly making it in motion. In fact, it has some of the largest geysers, I think, NASA has seen on any of the moons in the solar system.
So Jupiter would not be a plausible place to go because of the radiation.
Well, Jupiter itself, yeah, it's just a gas. It's a gas giant, but it has a very massive radiation shield around it, kind of like we have a radiation belt around the Earth. It's called the Van Allen belts, and astronauts that go into deep space to the moon go through this radiation belt. Jupiter's is much more powerful. So we have to be very careful in the systems we use to enter that radiation belt. So Callisto is just far enough away that we can avoid that.
Okay. And that also, it sounds like basically once you get beyond the moon, everything beyond that becomes long term. How long is the trip out to? And I apologize, I forget the name of the Jupiter moon already. But how long does it take to get to Jupiter?
Well, at certain estimates right now, probably about 7 years, maybe less.
Oh, wow.
And by the time we're ready to go, like I said, we can launch assets at speed from the lunar surface. With rocket assist, once we're moving, we can achieve even faster speeds. So we might be able to drop that time down significantly.
Wow. And that again. So if it's a moon that's similar to our moon where there's no atmosphere or anything like that, is that? I mean, I guess with the station, I mean, we're going to be doing it on the moon. That is somewhere that would be colonized. And I know you don't like that term, but essentially. At the end of the day, the exploration forces that. Yeah. So.
And the way these areas will be funded is mostly from the sciences and research and all of that neat stuff.
I mean, I love it. It's essentially like Star Wars or Star Trek or any sci-fi show coming to life.
Exactly. And that's where we should be.
That's a very exciting thing to think about. And is there anything beyond there? Like, is it possible to go? I mean, I'm sure it's possible, but is it feasible to go beyond Jupiter's moon and explore, colonize beyond that?
Absolutely, and I intend to. Like I said, as we continue throughout the solar system, we'll be dropping outposts, and each of those outposts will bring the technology needed to expand those outposts. And then once we arrive at Callisto and we start building our outpost on it, we'll be able to do research. We'll be able to do the sciences necessary and build the systems necessary to explore the other moons all around the Jupiter system. From there, Neptune is my next favorite stop, and the moon Triton, which is another big, gigantic ice world that has water, it has methane and nitrogen. So these various worlds can fuel our progress all the way out to the distant planet of Neptune and its distant moon. And from there, I even have plans of going into what's known as the Kuiper Belt, which is a belt of billions of different objects, everything from just small asteroids up to what they call dwarf planets. And in fact, the New Horizons mission NASA sent out that just passed Pluto recently is heading out to look at one of those planetoids out in the Kuiper Belt. So it'll be several years before it actually reaches it. But there's another interesting planet or moon, that fascinates me. That's in a very elongated orbit around Neptune, and that planet, I can't remember the name off the top of my head, does its long orbit, and that extends clear out into the Kuiper Belt, to the furthest distant regions of the Kuiper Belt, and then comes within close proximity of Neptune. And I plan to put a science research station on it, so that we can track its progress clear out into the Kuiper Belt.
So I guess it almost sounds like that for the most part, save for Mars, the most logical place to put these space stations are going to be on the moons to all these planets.
Absolutely. Yeah, Neptune's a gas giant. There's really nowhere to land there. But observation stations from close proximity of these moons is a perfect sciences and research platform for everybody here on Earth to basically study these places long term from a very close range.
Now, I guess I don't know. I probably should know this, but we've already proven throughout the last episode and a half that my knowledge of space is not as intact as I once thought it was.
It's a lot bigger than you imagine now.
Yeah, and that's what I'm. So I guess, like, what is our solar system really consist of? Because it seems like it may have gotten a little bit bigger over the last years. Even though, like, Pluto is now a dwarf planet, but they found something beyond that that's also a dwarf planet, right?
Correct.
So is that part of our solar system? What?
It's all within our solar system. Yes, Kuiper Belt's part of our solar system. The only assets we've had to reach the boundaries of the solar system are the Voyager 1 and 2. I think 2 is almost on the verge of leaving the solar system. Voyager 1 has already left and is in interstellar space now. Basically, our solar system is covered in a big bubble, and the bubbles form from the energy of the sun. The sun pushes its energy outwards. The interstellar space pushes its energy back, creating a big bubble around us. The bubble's somewhat oblong because the sun is also in orbit around the Milky Way galaxy. So within this belt, or within this big bubble, is all of the solar energy and all of the objects that are within it, and the Kuiper Belt's just part of it. And all the Kuiper Belt shows is that there's still a hell of a lot more out there that we haven't even seen yet or even understand. So our solar system has gotten bigger in the last few years, and at least in the last couple of decades, with new discoveries popping out all the time.
Now, would anything that's discovered beyond that point or beyond the bubble, I guess, it would be considered a new solar system?
Well, everything beyond our solar system is interstellar space until you get to the next planet. So basically, the next planets we know of that exist are in Alpha Centauri, which is 4.5 light years away. It's a dual, the binary system with two suns that orbit each other.
Okay.
And according to science, they believe there is a large planet that orbits that sun from their observations. 4.5 light years away essentially means if you're traveling at light speed, you can reach there in 4.5 years.
So in the in terms of what travel we've been talking about, 7 to 9 months to get to Mars, what does that equate to get to there? That's 4.5 light years away.
Oh, we couldn't make it in our lifetime unless we were to travel at light speed.
Perfect. So that's advanced technology that we just don't have yet to get there.
Correct. We do have the idea behind creating a ship that could reach there in 4.5 years, a ship traveling at close to the speed of light. But then you enter into a whole new realm of mystery. It's not really mystery anymore. Einstein and his theory of relativity, and relativity in essence is based on perspective. Your perspective and my perspective. So from your perspective right now, you have a clock and you have a time registering on it. Your time is not the same time as my clock, because my clock's in a different time zone than yours. Mm-hmm. So from two different perspectives, we're in the same time, but not. And it gets worse as you leave a gravity well of Earth, which is pretty significant. So as a traveler leaves Earth, time appears to speed up to the person on the ground as compared to the person leaving the gravity well. And then when the person's in orbit, the person appears to speed up in orbit as compared to the person on the ground watching the asset flying around in orbit. The faster you go, the time dilation gets even worse. So a trip at light speed to Alpha Centauri in 4.5 years, by the time they reached there, stayed for a year, and decided to return, Earth would have probably aged many thousands of years.
Oh, wow. Oh, that's super fascinating.
Uh-huh.
So now is that mean the science fiction stories we've all seen are, I don't want to say lying to us, but is like, I guess, the warp drives that we have in Star Wars and Star Trek and stuff, is that essentially like traveling at light speed or faster? Or
actually, warp is actually a process, and science is actually looking at, because there's quite often that science fiction mimics science fact, or precludes science fact. And warping is essentially warping space. In other words, bending space to your will so that you can travel from point A to point B without actually traveling. You just disappear at one point and reappear at another. Okay. And they term these wormholes.
Okay.
So wormholes are known to exist. Creating one is beyond our scope of knowledge. They appear or just disappear anywhere. But according to science, they do exist. If at some point in the future we're able to harness one, who knows if we can use it to travel in that method. But at some point we're going to need to learn technology that we can achieve these great distances without the time dilation.
Oh my God. I love that. I've spoken to a few people about science fiction in the past, whether it be on this show or just like a written interview. That's such a common theme of like science fiction writers is saying science fiction is just fiction now. You know, it can be science fact in 10 years from now or whatever.
Yeah.
And it's kind of cool. And like when you saying that they're looking into it, like I audio gasp came out of me, because that's so cool. That, I mean, you were talking about, before we mentioned that, you're basically talking about, Star Trek, and for the most part with, exploring space, getting into deep space and stuff like that. But just the idea of being in a Millennium Falcon for the most part, like that, and they're looking into light, into warp drive, and
you want to get your mind blown again?
Oh, let's do it.
All right. You've seen the old Star Trek series, and I imagine the Star Trek movies.
Star Trek, I've seen bits and pieces of, so I know enough to probably fake it.
Okay, so with Star Trek, you've seen the Enterprise. Most everybody has. But imagine a ship of the future. We need to create gravity for ourselves. Gravity, we know, is centrifugal force. That we can control. We can't control regular gravity, so we can fake it. So with centrifugal force, NASA and other agencies and scientists have studied possible rotating stations. One of the prime examples came about a long time ago in the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey, with the rotating station that the characters reach at the beginning of the movie. The rotational aspect of a station basically puts a centrifugal force along the outside edge. So in essence, you're walking inside of a perhaps bicycle tire along the outside edge where the gravity is the greatest. And a large wheel with a set spin cycle can achieve the 1G we're used to, so that we can live and operate in space as if we were on Earth. Now imagine this wheel in space put on its side and maybe stacked with a couple other wheels on top of it, and then all encased in radiation shielding. And then you attach your engines to it and you have the Starship Enterprise.
That's really cool. Oh, that could be. See, I love the idea of just making all my childhoods come true, all my childhood dreams of space travel come true. So let's get it. I told you last time I wanted to get into some of the other things when it comes to space, and maybe not so much the sciencey stuff of it, but the science fiction of it. And we, from last time, we know that Apollo, that was like kind of your entry point into space. But
right.
What was it about? What was your first fictional space story that I guess grew your love even more for space?
Oh, I imagine it had to be Star Wars, the original.
Star Wars.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's got to be almost everybody's is Star Wars.
Uh-huh.
And based on the fact that you joined, was it the Navy in '84?
Correct.
So I would imagine then that you are one of the lucky souls that were able to see that in theater. The first one in theater.
Oh yeah, I saw it when I was a teenager.
Yeah. So when you went to go see that movie, and maybe not so much when you walked into that movie, but when you walked out, did you get the feeling that Star Wars was going to be something as special as it is? Oh God, what is it? 40 years later we're at?
Oh yeah. The first time we tried to go see it, there was so many hundreds of people at the theater that they were camped out in the parking lot. We couldn't see it the first day.
Oh wow!
It was that massive. I'd never seen a movie that popular up to that point, and it was unheard of for having that crowd at that theater during that time frame when we witnessed it. Everybody was a phenomenon. Was waiting there to go see this movie, and in essence, it's a vision of the future people want.
Yes, yeah. And so what do you think? And I know everyone probably has their own answer. So what's your answer? What is it about Star Wars, specifically the first one, A New Hope, that is so special that makes it as great as it is?
Yeah. It's special in the fact that the characters themselves, especially when you're talking from my point of view, the exploration aspect of space travel, the character of Han Solo in particular, being able to be free with his own ship, engage in his form of business. When you see something like that on screen, when you're brought down to a real world level of any individual can own a ship and do work to make a living, then you have the dream of a human race that is now not only Earth-based but solar system-based, or even at some point galactic-based.
Yeah, for me, I remember my favorite memory of Star Wars. Obviously, I watched it much later in life. It was probably, I guess it could have been very late 80s, but I have to assume that if I'm remembering it, I couldn't have been 5. I was probably closer to 7. So it was probably very early 90s was when my uncle first showed me that movie. And I remember sitting down and watching it with him. And like the one thing I'll always remember, and I talk about this story a lot, is when the Tusken Raider pops up and like knocks Luke back, and like making me jump and me getting scared the first time I saw that. And like that's that's probably the scene that I talk about the most, only because it is the scene that I for whatever reason it's just like hammered into my brain. But like you said, what I love about Star Wars is the idea of probably more so the fun side of it, of just being able to hop in my ship and fly around. I mean, it was a fun space story.
Exactly.
And it wasn't anything more than that. I mean, obviously there was another story behind it, but the heart of it, I guess, was it's just a fun space story about traveling through space and discovering new worlds and having, for me, like, having a cool ship, having a really cool looking spaceship, which is something that like has always kind of any medium or I guess any genre or story that takes advantage of maybe not a cool looking spaceship, but a cool ship of some sort is always like, I always go towards that. Like, for X-Men, they have their Blackbird, they have their jet that they fly around, and that's always really cool. And more recently in Guardians of the Galaxy, which I don't know, did you see Guardians of the Galaxy?
Yes, I did.
Okay, so
Good
for
movie.
me, what'd you say?
Good movie.
Oh, I really enjoyed it. Before Force Awakens came out, I've gone on record a few times saying that was a modern day Star Wars, as in that it was just a fun space adventure, and you had the Alyssa or the Milano, that he called his ship. That it was just such a fun story, and something that as I've rewatched like the Star Wars movies, and obviously now we have Guardians of the Galaxy and Guardians of the Galaxy 2, something that is as I watched them and as a teenager and being older, that fascinated me more was like the different races, the different alien races. And like the idea of, oh man, is that out there? And so what's your thought on that? Let's go back to a little bit of science. What's your thought on other races? And I'm guessing not in our solar system is what you possibly believe, but beyond that?
Yeah. Well, within our solar system and beyond, I'll touch on.
Okay. Okay.
It is already known life is very prolific on Earth. You can find it anywhere from the deepest oceans to the hottest regions on Earth. We find life. Not necessarily intelligent life, but building blocks to life. Life more than likely exists on planets in the solar system. Possibly, again, not intelligent life, but building blocks to life. The theorized oceans under Europa, if this warm water more than likely has life within it. It might even surprise us what types of life. But besides all of that, the universe, as massive as it is, you're talking billions upon billions of stars within our own galaxy. And when you combine the fact that there's billions of galaxies out there, you have many more areas within our galaxy and beyond that have to have life. It's impossible for them not to have it. So the thought that there wouldn't be any intelligent life out there would be mind-boggling to me. I imagine the universe is teeming with intelligent life. The only problem is they're probably so far away from us, it'll be many, many, many generations before we can even perceive actually meeting them. Whether or not a super high advanced technology race has visited us in the past, I don't know. I believe it's possible because where we're at, we theorize is not possible. simply because of our own perspective and our own knowledge and our own technology and where it's at its current level. But that's not to say there's another race out there that has the technology to be able to travel far distances and be able to find new things. So it is, generally speaking, in my opinion, possible for that intelligent life to have visited our solar system. But then you also come into the fact that life on Earth is different. Even though we're all human, and we have a human race, which I always term a one race culture. I don't believe in multiple races because we are all human. We all bleed the same red blood. We all have the same bones and the same materials that make up our DNA. The only thing that causes us to be different or look different is the regions around the globe that we grew up in and time. And when you consider the vast time and distances that are involved in the solar system, as we expand out, as we start dropping outposts at all these various locations, as those outposts begin to expand and draw more people, those various entities out across our solar system with all these vast distances will form their own culture, and they'll also begin to look different generation after generation due to their environment. We're going to be our own alien races eventually.
And that's something that is always kind of touched upon in, I shouldn't say always, but it is touched upon in science fiction. Is I guess, it's just basic evolution. So do you think that we would, as we evolve and our cultures develop on these space stations, would we become too reliant on the lunar, well, I shouldn't say just the lunar, but on the space stations to kind of keep everything going? Or would we eventually be able to walk out of the space station with no spacesuit and be able to thrive on, the on Mars, on the moons and whatnot?
Yeah, that's a very good question. At some point, I would have to say yes. Near term, no. It'll probably be many generations before we're capable of the technology needed to. Basically, it would be similar to Star Trek and Star Wars with shields, big bubbles that surround these stations where people could go outside the station and float around in space and do work and whatnot. Shielding in itself could also, perhaps with a very large rotation, cause artificial gravity, or maybe at some point in the future we'll become technically reliant on being able to control gravity and create actual artificial gravity without a spin. I think technology and human intuition will win out in the end over every single problem that we come across, and we've proven it time and time again throughout history.
And I want to go back to just talking about alien races because it's fun. How would, and this is just, I guess, would have to be more, just personal thoughts and opinions. But thinking of intelligent life outside of Earth, outside of our solar system, do you picture just another kind of humanoid? Like, is there another Earth out there that just basically has more human beings or their equivalent of that? Or do you think gets a little bit more fantasy or a little bit more science fiction-y and you get to see like the pig people of Star Wars, or you get to see the Tusken Raiders or whatever it is?
Well, you got to do to answer that question is look back at our own history on our own world and the various life forms that appeared here throughout the ancient times. The human beings themselves, the Homo sapiens, us, we were only one of several humanoid races that were on Earth at the time. Neanderthals existed at the same time we did, and we kind of battled them out. So they went extinct and we didn't. Several other humanoid life forms also went extinct. So life is going to form how it needs to form within their environment, and how well those lives succeed according to nature it'll determine whether or not that particular life form survives and thrives. So I expect we would see from many of these different areas across the galaxy or across the known universe would probably be surprisingly different from us.
Okay. Yeah, I just I can't imagine. I don't know why. Or maybe it's I can't. It's I don't want to imagine just like more planets out there that are just basically human, like normal human beings. I like the fantasy aspect of it. Like there's
Well, you'll
intelligent
see that.
dinosaurs out there.
You will actually see that before we actually ever meet a true alien. You'll see many different humanoid forms of life. Like I said, as they spread out across the solar system, and we start growing colonies, generation after generation, so those individuals will begin to look slightly different. Uh, uh, some of the aspects that create the pigment in our skin are just not needed inside of a enclosed habitat. Living in an enclosed habitat is going to have an effect on how we and our future generations come to look in the future. So all of these facts are in consideration. So your dream of many different humanoids is plausible.
Well, so like the pigment that just kind of in generations they're going to be make them basically albino. No, if
Perhaps.
they have no.
But perhaps the
Uh,
lighting systems we use maybe even make us darker. Who knows? I don't know the
I
particulars
was
behind all of that, but
I was hoping as a pale white boy that I would be able to fit in space.
well, you might. But
As a pale
what if our
Irishman.
station's right in the Callisto, right next to Jupiter, which outputs a lot of light of its own? So I mean, there's many different determinate factors of where you go and what'll happen.
So moving away from space and going into science fiction again, though, is so since you're such a fan of space and obviously very knowledgeable about all that stuff, and we talked briefly about Einstein and stuff.
Mhm.
What are your thoughts? I want to touch on like there's two other like kind of major science fictiony things that I really enjoy, and I'm only thinking about it because the Flash is coming back tomorrow, and the Flash on CW touches on both these subjects.
Interesting.
I've been thinking about it today. So what's your thoughts on time travel? We'll start there.
My thoughts on time travel: we do it already.
Okay.
Maybe not to
Okay.
the degree of science fiction. I believe it's possible, like I believe anything's possible. Over time, at some point, somebody will discover a process that allows us to do it. Current theories suggest we could only go back so far as our birth and no farther because we didn't exist before that. But I don't really necessarily believe in those theories. I believe at some point, because of the great distances, we can bend time, or time gets bent from speed or by extreme gravity. Gravity will at some point be the basis for time travel, because great gravity, we already know, bends time and space. So with these aspects and with the possible addition of wormholes, which we know to exist, along with many other theories that are being proposed, at some point it'll be discovered. At some point we'll figure out how to do it. What I do believe is that once we do it, because history has already happened, or at least our history has already happened, if we were to go back, we'd be creating a new history, if you will. I don't believe that it would affect if you were to go back, say, and one of the greater ideas, if you were to go back and change a major event in history, what would happen in the future? I don't think it would affect at least your individual future, because your perception of time is different from mine. How's that sound?
No, and that kind of leads into into the other topic, but I do want to kind of stay on time travel for a second. But that kind of leads into like Earth 2 and Earth 3 and Earth 4, and alternate Earths, alternate
Sliders.
dimensions. What's that? Yeah, sliders.
The
Oh my
television show
god,
Sliders.
oh, that was one of my favorite television shows as a kid. Uh, and I started watching that show simply because of it's the dude from Indiana Jones. I forget his name.
Right.
But I was an Indiana Jones fan, and I recognized him from Indiana Jones. I was like, oh, I gotta watch this show. And when that show appeared on Netflix, probably 4 or 5 years ago at this point, if not longer, I was so happy to be able to rewatch that series. That's and I forgot about it probably probably for at least the last couple months, because I every time I pass it, I'm like, oh, I want to rewatch that again. So I haven't thought about it in a while until you just mentioned it. But that might be one of my favorite science fiction shows. Such a great concept for a show. Such a great, another thing kind of, I would say, I talk about time travel a lot, but when I really have to sit down and think about it, I think one of my favorite concepts of science fiction beyond space travel and time travel would be the alternate Earths. I think that fascinates me more than anything else. And I mean, I was going to ask you about alternate Earths, but you kind of answered it in your time travel discussion. So, but do you think is there alternate Earths currently? I mean, I guess that's again all due to perspective, because right now we don't have the perspective of time travel, but I'll let you answer.
All right. Basically, I think that the idea of multiple Earths does exist. Simply being because of the fact that there's many theories going around. We already know there's 4 dimensions. On those 4 dimensions we can prove. You have your standard 3 dimensions, and then you have your 4th dimension, which is time. Because time is a dimension in of itself, those dimensions can be manipulated, including time, which we already know time can be manipulated by speed and by gravity. So because of all of this, some of the other theories that go around, there's more than just 4 dimensions. I've read some research where there's somewhere upwards around 24 or maybe even more dimensions than that. And Stephen Hawking's covers some of those theories. With that in mind, we have really can't imagine what those dimensions can determine. But as you touched on, and as the television show Sliders touches on, those dimensions could be a reality that is maybe slightly or the same as compared to our own reality. And there's another theory that touches on, and I'm trying to remember what it's called. It's called superposition. Okay. Keep in mind the theory is based on the microscopic scale of an electron, where an electron can exist, supposedly according to the theory, in all aspects at once, but once you incorporate a medium or a monitor, if you will, somebody watching the electron, it only perceives what you perceive it's supposed to do. So if you were to fire an electron like a bullet at a plate, you know where it's going to hit. And if you were to fire that same electron without viewing it, it'll create a pattern, what's termed as a wave pattern. And then the other pattern it creates is the straight pattern where you imagine the electron was supposed to hit. So, in other words, the wave pattern possibly predicts that, in theory, that electron exists in all states at once. So if an electron exists in all states at once, but it only exists in your perception as you perceive it to exist, that means you just don't see into those other perceptions. Or, in a broader sense, those other universes where it does exist.
Yeah, and my love for, I guess I was gonna say Flash, but it's Sliders. Obviously, Sliders is my love of the other dimensions, because that's exactly where it started. At least for me, was Sliders with the alternate dimensions, and just the idea of I don't know how many times they did the bit where, like, oh, we just see ourselves again. I know they did it a few times. I love the idea of seeing the different versions of you, and there were so many of them in that show. It got a little wonky when he combined with a different version of himself because Jerry O'Connell wanted off the show. But it was such a good show, and I'm pretty sure I'm gonna go watch some episodes, at least one episode when we're done this, because I need to start watching that show again. I need to go on my 6th rewatch of it because it's such a good show. Wait. Anyway, I want to go back to time travel. What is time travel has been represented vastly differently in different stories and films and stuff. What to you is the most plausible slash believable version of time travel with like the rules that are established in whatever story.
Interesting. I would say plausible or believable.
Yeah,
There's so many of them.
yeah,
There's so many of them out there.
yeah.
I would have to say sliders again, simply because of the multidimensional aspect of it. Because I believe if you were yourself were to go back in time, you would actually be entering into a different dimension or a different mini universe that's a kind of a copy of this one, perhaps. Except perhaps in that dimension, you enter into a different time period. So, I mean, sliders is probably the best example, according to my belief theories, based on the sciences that are available.
Now, if let's say for me, time travel I've always imagined it working both ways. You know, you can go forward, you can go backward. I guess
we
in
already know we
that
can go
term,
forward.
like I've always kind of imagined Back to the Future as like a pretty good rule set. Maybe not necessarily the method, but the rule set that they kind of put in place. I always kind of dug. If you were to, let's say, travel back in time, I just want to get your thoughts on this, and not change a thing, would you still be creating an alternate universe? Would you be able to go back and be in the same, world that you were in?
You mean return back to the same place?
Yeah.
That is a very good question. I imagine it would be possible. I think if we were just starting out, because of the terms, I believe that when you make these movements, at least according to actual science and not necessarily science fiction, that the process of time traveling, you're in the process of bending time and space, and in that process, you're going to a destination that is different. That if you were to be able to change it, which you would be able to because you're there, that would change your normal future history, supposedly. So I think that once you've left to go to that point in time, everything that's supposed to happen to you in the future, at least you yourself from that point in time from where you're at, will be different. Can we return to the same place? I imagine we could once we are learning capable. I think we can pretty much do anything we want to do once we get to that point. But I think the sciences and the reality and the aspects of it are going to surprise us with even a lot more crazy information as we get there.
I almost wonder, based off what we're saying now, is if you were to travel back in time and something were to change, or even if something weren't to change, just kind of based off what we're saying now, and you're basically just, if you were to return to your present, it would be kind of an alternate universe. Would that mean that you're just missing from, let's say you traveled back in time, are you missing from my universe now?
Well, if you look at it, when you make a trip, any trip anywhere, you're missing from where you're supposed to be at. So it'll be just like you left and you just didn't return, I imagine.
Oh, so see, that puts a spin on time travel that almost like a fear of time travel, where I don't like, I would not want to risk not coming back to my universe. But that is the stories of sliders trying to get back to their universe.
Correct. And there's so many of them. How do you know you're going to get to the right one?
Yeah. You could get to one. I remember the one episode that's coming to mind is when they get back to an Earth that's almost completely identical, but the one thing that at least the first thing they notice is that it's not the Golden Gate Bridge. It's like a blue bridge or something. That just, that's popped in my head right now.
Not quite the same.
Okay. You need to, have you, and maybe you have, maybe I just don't know this. You should really write science fiction. You are well versed in the science of it and in the fiction of it.
I'm actually actually writing a science fiction with science fact novel.
Oh, that's perfect. I would love to talk to you about that when you're done that. Uh, and whenever you're ready to talk about it, I'll shoot you my email so that we can go through those channels. But
I've actually been posting portions of it to Bain Books.
Hey there, super friends. Our interview with Caed got cut just a little short as we were ending the show. I don't know what happened, but you know what? Pretty good success. We recorded for over 2.5 hours, I think, or close to it, over 2 days. When he was, 9 hours plus ahead of me. It was a really difficult interview to schedule because of the time difference, and it just kind of worked out that his morning worked for my night, and we got hooked up, and what an amazing conversation I had with Caed about the moon, Mars, and beyond, and the stars and space and stuff. Such a great conversation. Really enjoyed it. Make sure you check out Bain Books and just search for Caed Aldwych, and you can find his book. I think he said he's posting some excerpts there, so make sure you go there to check that out. Make sure you follow the Global Space Organization on Facebook. Just go to facebook.com/Global Space Organization, and make sure you check out their website, gso-space.org. Again, that's gso-space.org. And I want to just talk about something that's pretty obvious at this point. This episode is about a week behind, if not more, based, depending on when it goes up. Everything is awesome. Awesomepodcast.com has been a little silent for the month of November, at least the first 2 weeks of it. And I will fill you guys in shortly in a bonus episode, I'm sure, before the end of the year, before probably even the holidays, after Thanksgiving, but before the other holidays. It's rest assured, we're still here, we're back. Actually, as I'm recording this, I'm getting ready to go to Bridge Set Sound. They're hosting us for their for a live podcast show, so that's really cool of them. So we're still kicking, we're still doing things. I had a family emergency that happened very early on in the month of November of 2016 here, and I'm still kind of dealing with that as far as like my emotions and whatnot. We'll talk about it. You listen to episode 37, you have an idea, you know me, you have an idea what happened, and when I'm ready to talk about it, we will. Until then, I have tons of audio that I'm trying to catch up on and get out to you guys. I believe if you're listening to this, before the 23rd, before Thanksgiving, it means we're on time. We're good. We're getting there. We're on time with our audio. So big thanks to all the super friends out there for thoughts, prayers, and just the general understanding of why I haven't posted anything in the last couple of weeks. I know you guys, not super friends necessarily, but I know podcast listeners expect to see something every Wednesday or whatever day the podcast is supposed to come out. I'm the same way with my podcast that I listen to, but I hope that, like me, I understand when you got to take care of yourself. You got to take care of family first. So hopefully you guys understand. And I appreciate you guys for following me along for the last 41 episodes I think we're at now. So thanks a lot, guys. We got some stuff special, planned for episode 50. We got a big birthday bash to celebrate for Everything is Awesome coming up at the end of January. So, I assure you, we're kicking. We're going to celebrate. We're going to be back to normal real soon, or as normal as we can get when it comes to life and whatnot. Thanks to Caed for being on the show. What a great interview, like I said. And thanks to you guys for listening. You can find me on Twitter at ThatNerdyKev. You can find the show on Twitter at RealAwesomePod. For Everything is Awesome, I'm Kev. We'll see you next time right here, only on AwesomePodcast.com. We've been awesome.